where no one can go in there. So, but I can go on a commercial flight, like I jump on, you know, a plane and then I get clinked up, like, you know? So he's like, I don't totally know. So I'm just like, wow, you know, these guys are all clipped, you know, everyone's, and I was used to the pilot having his phone turned off, and that was always scary for me because I never knew if he was busted. When he was flying, the phone went straight to voicemail. And then I was always hoping he gets there, And one, he pops up after that, right? After the lawyer told me there's an indictment, multiple fucking, you know, whatever going on. Then a couple dudes are actually like hitting me on my Boost Mobile. Yeah, but they've been arrested.
Yeah.
And I want to give them the benefit.
Nobody's saying nothing though, right?
Yeah, no, you think they're solid people.
But nobody said, hey bro, I got popped today, Logan.
No.
They're just all hush hush.
One guy eventually did, and he was like, oh yeah, you know, and he had a couple 100 pounds of kush at his pad, and they didn't even take him down to the station. They basically said, like, we're going to keep this, you know, call us tomorrow, and we'll, you know, obviously he's going to start working with them. And I don't know if that, you know, he was already calling me with them on the phone, but he was like, they came here, because I already knew people around that lived near his house. They were like, his house is raided. You know, I was already getting calls from people in the neighborhood telling me. And I'm like, you know, what's going on? And now you're calling me? And so even the pilot calls me. And he's like, no, I'm good. And he swears up and down that he's not arrested. And he's like, I want to keep going. I have, you know, like a 400 pack on the plane now. And I was like, well, where's the plane? And he's like, oh, you know, I was having an issue, so I left it, you know, in Detroit, and it seemed like really sketchy. And in a roundabout way, he was in a holding tank in Chicago with another customer of mine. It was like the pilot and another customer of mine. That customer told his wife, and his wife was able to get a message back to me that the pilot was in a holding tank, and, you know, and he's making calls to me. You know, like wanting to like keep maneuvering around and like better his situation. So once I got that information, I remember I scooted over. I was in Chicago myself. I jumped in a car and I drove with a buddy to Atlanta because I had a passport at a house I had in Atlanta, and I was like, I gotta get my passport. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know where. I'm probably going to Canada or where, you know. And so I'm trying to get to Atlanta, and as I make it to Atlanta, I had two houses there. I had like a party house, and then I had a lake property. And I had, like, of course, I had the boats, the jet skis, and it was a sick pad. And I'm at my lake property, and I remember driving really far and calling the pilot. And I just called him out. I was like, I've already had 2 or 3 conversations thinking that he was a solid dude, and, you know, I'm kind of fucked already, right? So I call him, and I was like, I can't believe you did this. Like, you're calling me, and you've already been, you know, arrested. He's like, oh no, they gave me an OR bond, which is your own recognizance. And he's like, they arrested my wife, and I had no choice, but I'm good. I'm gonna go underground. And I was like, man, like, you always told me you were a Green Beret, and that you had ice in your veins, and they'll never get anything from you. And, you know, like me, growing up and like listening to like even the hip hop music and the people that I dealt with in Canada, I was brought up a different way where you don't fucking say anything. And prior to me getting arrested, I had little run-ins from when I had my window tint shop. I did little, like, you know, fraud shit with credit cards and little things where people would come and say, whose card is it? I don't know. And it always went away. So I've always known to, I don't know. Right. It fucking goes away. Like, what do you got? I don't fucking know. You're stupid, you know, and I got nothing to say. And so anyways, all of that shit happens, and I'm actually in Atlanta just hanging out, and I had a couple really nice cars that I had at a body shop that I was doing, and I was trying to like hem up my whole situation of like, okay, my cars are here, I need to pick up as much money that I can from people that haven't been arrested, gather up as much money as I can, and try to make it up to like Canada. And then I had bros that had, you know, houses in Mexico, so I was trying to figure you know, how can I scoot out
Together game plan.
of the states? And as I'm calling the dude to, you know, inquire about my cars, I'm having like motors built and custom rides done. And the dude, I guess the feds went by there and were like, hey, where's his cars? He's like, oh, here's the number he called me on last time we talked. So then they instantly, boom, GPS on that phone. And I was hiding out at a friend's house, and everyone else had got hit from that initial indictment, maybe like a month. I was able to ride out. You know, like I drove straight from, you know, the time from Chicago to Atlanta, and that was probably because I was renting like vacation properties. I wasn't in the hotels, and I would stay like on the 14th floor and rent it from, you know what I mean? So it was probably hard to track some of my, and I always did that. I used encrypted phones, I paid cash, I always had 6 or 7 throwaway phones. Everything about me was ghost. I would pay people to put cars in their name. So I was really fucking stealth, you know? So sure enough, here they come to the crib where I'm at in Atlanta, and you know, I get arrested, and I'm thinking, you know, I didn't have anything there, but maybe like, probably only like 60 or 70 grand in cash, you know?
No weed, no nothing.
No nothing.
You're getting away with shit.
Yeah.
They get me with nothing.
Yeah, like, it's like, I don't know, this is going back to, like, I had no difference in my head what state prison was and what federal prison was. I didn't even know there was, like, 2 different agencies. That's how, like, never been in the system. I just thought jail is jail, prison's prison. You know what I mean? I didn't know I hit the fucking big leagues when they came over, you know? But, so, you know, I get rolled up and they take me down to, originally you go to, you know, see about getting bond. And they take you to, I went to an Atlanta county jail. And the next day they shot me over to, you know, see about getting a bond. The judge says absolutely not, no bond. I start trying to hire a lawyer, and then the lawyer originally quotes me like 50 grand, and then after hears about how crazy big my case is, he's like, oh yeah, if you're going to trial or whatever, it's going to be about 200, and if you're going to plea agreement, it's still going to be about 120. So I'm trying to round up money through like my family and everybody saying, you know, I gave the guy a deposit of like 30 grand, trying to work with this guy. He's telling me like everyone, at this point there's like 32 people that have been raided in multiple states. They did like a massive raid all in one day. Prior to me, it was like 3 or 4 states all at like, let's say 3 in the afternoon or whatever time, you know, just boom. Everyone gets scooped up. The lawyer's telling me like, dude, there's all kinds of people that have been cooperating for the past month. And they know everything about you, you know, you can't go to trial. You'll never win, and they're gonna bring in, you know, 7 or 8 people that are gonna fucking testify you. And me, I was like, they don't have anything. You know what I mean? Because at this point, I have no bond, and my lawyer could only talk to me through glass. I couldn't even like really fight my case. You know, I was in like a really lame fucking housing thing. You know, and they did it on purpose because, you know, I would never fucking sit down and, you know, they call it debrief and meet with these dudes. So they put me in a really fucked up, you know, sorry to use the language, right? So they put me in a really bad fucking holding tank, bro. Like, literally people that are in they call it a pod. And everyone in my pod is on a high-powered, like, murder case. Like, when he goes to court, it's gonna be on the news. He killed a famous boxer. He killed like 3 people, and I'm like a weed dealer, you know what I mean? Going, what? I don't understand, like, what's going on? Like, it seems like, you know, I'm in it like.
But you're just as heavy a hitter, legal wise,
right?
As the murderer, the fucking.
Right.
So on and so forth, and your head is still.
I was a little bit in shock because I was the only dude there on like a drug case. Everyone else was like, there was dudes there that robbed like 6 or 7 Brinks trucks and then got a body off one of them.
Right.
Thank you. And so I was like, wow, this is like weird that, you know? And so my lawyer eventually wants all this money and I can't pay him fast enough. So he actually submits to the court to drop me. And all of a sudden they're like, hey, you're going to court one day. I go to court, I gotta defend myself. And he's like, he doesn't have the money to pay me. he's not paying me enough, and I agreed to pay him like 10 grand a month or something.
Right.
So he drops me, and now I'm stuck with a public defender. And
Looking good.
you know, and so prior to my paid lawyer dropping me, we had done what's called a bond appeal. Because I was like, this is crazy that I've never been arrested.
Yeah.
Why can't I get a bond? Like, everyone gets bonds,
I
right?
got a crumble weed, you know, kind of, why can't I get a bond?
So they agreed to do what's called a bond appeal, which means you go back. Because the first time, they threw me in like, probably not even 24 hours of me being arrested. And my public defender they assigned me, she shows up late, like, oh, my car problem. She doesn't even know my name. She's like, what's going on? The judge, yeah, no bond. You know, and so I was like, that wasn't even fair. Like, so the next
You want
time,
fair, go come on, motherfucker.
yeah, right. The judge says before my paid lawyer can drop me, he has to represent me at my bond appeal.
For sure.
And so this time I have all my ducks in a row. I'm ready to turn in my passport. I have like family that say like, oh, they'll vouch. You know, I'm willing to say I'll take an ankle bracelet. These people bring in like the lead investigators. And they all get up and they're like, oh, he uses multiple phones, he travels on private jets, he uses, he doesn't use bank accounts, he uses all cash. And I thought, man, I possibly have a chance, you know, like I'm doing okay. Like, I think my mom got up and we're gonna make sure he appears at his court appearances. And then the FBI agents got up and they're like, no, he's this guy, he's this guy. And the judge said, all right, I'm gonna recess for 10, 15 minutes and come back. And I was, praying like, man. Yeah. And literally, I guess it's probably meant to be that I was denied bond again. Because I was like, I'm gone. You know what I mean? If they give me bond, like, I'm Canada. You know what I mean? Because I already know all my bros are up there. I used to travel up there all the time. My friends are I have a big network in Canada. It's the same as my LA. And I was like, and then, now in retrospect, I just thought like, now, I probably maybe would have, maybe wouldn't have, but I thought now, like in retrospect, you might as well just drink your medicine. You know, like if I did get bond, yeah, you might as well. I got an ankle bracelet, show up to my court dates, give me what I'm going to get. So I would have these. Eventually, too, at the bond appeal, my lawyer's like, hey, we would like to have him moved. We don't know why he's over here, and we can't even have a lawyer visits without going through glass. And there was another holding facility that was a federal, and they had me in like some county, like high-powered one, and the marshals chimed in, and he's like, oh, we have him there for a reason. And the judge is like, what's the reason? And they're like, and he basically just tried to reinforce, like, we're not going to say, but he's there for a reason. The reason was people that already had got arrested were in there, and you have to have what's called a separatees, because they're already, spilling the beans on all about me. So, eventually, I'm just fucking unhit, And so, as I would have my lawyer meetings, I come to realize that in the federal system, they have mandatory minimums. And then there's no such thing as probation or parole. And there's no thing as like, oh, the prison's overcrowded, we're going to kick you out.
Right.
And so, as I start to learn all this, I never knew that before.
The pill's getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
You have to swallow.
Yeah. And so,
What was the mandatory minimum?
It started at 10.
Okay.
And so it took them probably like 3 plea agreements before I started reading like legal books. And they brought me one plea agreement, and I was like, I'm not going to sign that.
Like, first deal was how much?
I think it was even a smaller amount. It was like 5 years to like, I want to say like 5, I don't know if it was open-ended, they call it 5 to life. But they added cocaine onto it. Because the Canadians, we used to do, some of them would do trading. Because they don't use American dollar in Canada. So some of the dudes, instead of having their 3 to 5 million here, they would rather just bring over birds across the border and transfer their money into birds. So now all of a sudden, they're like linking me into transactions that don't really work with me, like that they know of, but they don't. I'm not on the hook for them. And I was like, fuck no, am I not signing for some cocaine? Like, I'm fucking here for weed, and I'll do that. And now it's like, the mandatory minimum, it's like 10 to life. And then when I see that, I'm like, oh man, life? Like, this, just that chiming in your head. Like, the first one I don't think had life in it. I think it just said like a crazy amount of months, like, 30 years or whatever it was. But the term life, when it rings in your head, and you're already here, and here I am, like, trying to be like, dude, I didn't get caught with nothing. And I couldn't really listen to all of the CDs. So I didn't know I was on, like, tons of conversations. He would just, every now and then, he would bring me, like, a piece of paper, and it would have all of it written out, like, what my phone conversation was with this dude. And there were some pretty gnarly ones. Like, there was one dude that owed, like, let's say I dropped to you, and your customer owed you. But I was like, well, dude, if you're not going to collect from them, tell me who this guy is, and I'm going to collect from him. So I had conversations like that regarding, like, having a crew, and yeah, people about to get violent. And so I was like, wow. And then the next plea agreement came back, and it was like 5 kilos, or 5 kilos of cocaine, and I was like, no, I'm not signing for any cocaine. So it was, first when I was arrested, it came in at 250 pounds of marijuana, and I was like, whoa. Even at the bond hearing, my lawyer was like, Your Honor, it's like 250 pounds. It's like a 5-year thing. Like, why can't he be let out on bail? It's nothing. But in the federal system, and for those that, this is like a new thing for them, they have this thing, and us inmates refer to it as ghosto. And so they do what's called relevant conduct, is the verbiage in the federal government. So the government will say, okay, well, we indicted you on 250 pounds. Well, we know you've been selling weed for X amount of years, and you've done this many, so now we're just going to just pop a random number out of midair. And so...
You moved 40 tons.
Yeah. And so the magic number that came back was 1,800 pounds. And even for what I was doing, I was like, wow, that's love. Like, fucking, you know what I mean? Like, boy, did they have their fucking numbers wrong. You know what I mean? Like, that's like fucking a couple months or whatever. And I mean, that's really nothing. So when it came back at signing a plea agreement at 1,800 pounds, and then the kilos of cocaine, and then there was those two are like one count. And the second count was money laundering. And so I told the lawyer, like, hey, I'm not going to do the cocaine. So then he starts to tell me that because they're the same count, they wash each other out. It's not like, oh, you get 10 for cocaine, you get 10 for marijuana. It's 10, and they wash together. And so I felt a little bit better about that, right? And as I was reading my law books, and I was like, well, still, I get something for signing a plea agreement. Like, I'm not going to negotiate and just like, yeah, I'm doing this and bow down. Like, okay, so take off the money laundering, and I'll sign for the drugs. And then they, I battled back and forth. They came back and said, they won't remove money laundering, but in the federal system, you get sentenced to a number chart, and it's referred to as the guidelines. So your guidelines, mine, for instance, fall at like level 32. And the guidelines equals the amount of drugs. So they say 1,000 pounds, whatever, equals 32. So the guy says, then they have what's called enhancement points. And so a money laundering charge is a 2-point enhancement. So it takes my weed at 32 and brings it to a 34. He's like, they're willing to take off the 2 points. So I eventually agreed after my lawyer just like basically like berated me, like, listen, the more you don't sign a deal, every day they find new information. Some new dude's telling them this.
And he's greasing up to fuck you too.
Yeah, and at one point I was like, dude, you probably play golf with these fucking dudes. And he had like this shit-eating grin on his face and laughed at me.
You're wondering where I'm playing.
Yeah, and I was just like, so as I would sit there with him and he would pull out the chart and be like, this is where you are. You're basically at like 10 years. And then I was like, well, if they take away the fucking 2-point for money laundering, and then when you sign a plea agreement in the federal system, they give you 3-point reduction. So I'm like, okay, so I'm saying I'm at 32, but if I take away the 3 point for signing the plea agreement, that puts me at a 29. A 29 is like 7 years. But you're bringing me a plea agreement that says 10. And he was like, it's just the way it is. And I was like, but no, it should be starting at 5. And he's like, no, they're not going to budge. It's a minimum of 10. And he's like, the only way people get below the 10 is if they cooperate. Then the government will do what's called a downward departure. And I was like, but this doesn't make sense, but my number is 29. Like, and he was like, it doesn't work. You know, he's like, you can argue until you're red in the face. It is what it is. So I sat there and, you know, I remained in like...
You ever think of cooperating?
Not really, because of the people that were above me.
You knew what would happen.
Yeah, like it's just not how I was built. I've already had run-ins where I always got away by saying, I don't know. You know what I mean? And even though in this scenario, I'm like, there's no really, I don't know anymore, I still felt like if I keep my mouth shut, it's not going to get like worse, and I didn't really see the scenario of like getting better, you know?
Right.
So it just, you know, and it just is like, it's just reinforced in like, you know, my age, we grew up different than some of the other people, you know? And so I go to my sentencing.
We grew up in this age. They
Right.
grow up in this age.
You know, and even on the Herc interview, I talk about, you know, years ago when I was DJing, I used to hang out with people like Eazy-E and NWA. You know, so I was in that thing that's like, fuck the police, you know, like, and if those people knew who I worked with in Canada, they would also know that that's like a huge no-no, you know what I'm saying? So anyhow, I eventually go to my sentencing, and at this point, I'm waiting for my pre-sentencing. My pre-sentencing is about 18 months while I'm just being held, waiting. And so...
So you've been down 18, 19 months now?
Yeah, I'm waiting to get sentenced. My prosecutor, the lady was pregnant, so they put it off a couple times or whatever.
Not that it mattered at this point.
Yeah, but even at one point, they have this thing called a pre-sentencing report. And the pre-sentencing report came back at some fucking crazy number suggesting that I should be, they had all of these enhancements for the number system again. Like, I had a co-defendant who was in my stash house. He had a gun there, so that's 4 points. Then they said, oh, well, Sin's the leader. That's 4 points. They call leadership role in the federal system. So that's 4. And then they introduced the money laundering, even though it was in writing on the plea agreement. It said -2. And I was like, now all of a sudden it's back in there in the pre-sentencing report. And the pre-sentencing report is built so that the judge can know, like, where do I sentence this person? Yeah. So he looks at that pre-sentencing and says, okay, well, I can agree with this. And, you know, it's like a blueprint for him on what he should do in regards to sentencing. So the day of sentencing, my lawyer comes and meets me, you know, down in the basement. He's like, hey, they have these ledgers they got off you. And it was just numbers, you know, like, this dude owes me 12 grand, this guy owes me whatever the case is. And he's saying, they're saying, and they fucked up by giving me only 1,800 pounds. The day of sentencing, they came back and they said, he's on the hook now for 12,000 pounds. Without, like, having anything structured in paper, or that's my charge. It was like, hey, Your Honor, we're shooting for 12.
Change your mind.
Yeah. And he shows me this paper, and he shuts it through the little gated fence, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this is money. These are like transaction money numbers. I said, I would never in my life have a sheet that has like 12,000 pounds. I never in like one load, or in a lot of loads, never received 12,000 pounds. Like, okay, you want to say that, it's just not true. The factual thing is, this piece of paper that has my handwritten notes on it is money. It's not pounds. You know what I mean? And so, thank God, like, even going into it, people in my pod knew, they were like, dude, your judge is the best. He's the most lenient judge, and you got a good judge. And so instantly, the judge says, okay, we're doing this, and reads the docket and goes, well, I'm not going with what's here, what you guys are going with, the 12,000 pounds. I'm going to go with what's here in the plea agreement. So let's go ahead and start. And then I was like, wow, because even like going into it, like waiting in the fucking holding tank downstairs, you know, waiting to go to sentencing, I was like, man, you know, where is this gonna go? You know, at the time I had already lost everything. The government comes in, they're like, every car I owned, confiscated. Every house I owned, confiscated. Boats, jet skis. When I was arrested, the dude couldn't wait to get the Rolex off my wrist. Boom. Taking Rolexes, taking jewelry. Literally everything you could think of. Even things that I had like prior. Yeah, man, like everything was stripped from me. So I already had like nothing going into sentencing. I was, you know, they stripped everything away. You're left, and even that is hard to deal with mentally. I would get letters that come in the mail, and through the plea agreement, I would have to sign them off. I signed off a Range Rover. I signed off a 1970 Chevelle, but clean as could be.
Now you're back to asking mom to send money on your books.
Yeah, right? And so I literally had all kinds of stuff. I had the best car I had. I love cars, I'll tell you. I had a 1955 convertible Oldsmobile with like 7,000 miles. Like dumped to the ground on airbags, immaculate. They took it, you know, and it was like, so going into my sentencing, I go there and I'm like a relief that the judge said I'm going to go with, you know, this. I had prepared letters from my family, like cousins, uncles. We all put in letters to the judge like, hey, you know, he's never been arrested before. He's a good guy. He's, you know, whatever.
You scrolled through them.
Yeah. My mom gets up there. My mom never knew I did this. You know, I kept it like under wraps. I blamed my money on other venues, right? And so she was up there in tears. And when it all came down to it, the judge was like, you know, you had a chance to get out. You had plenty of opportunity through what you were doing and some of the things that you had done, and you never took the chance. And it just goes to show, because I told him, you know, I was like, I was remorseful and I made a mistake, you know, like I prepared my little speech to try to like, you know, show some sympathy, like, you know, fuck, don't break me off, you know? And so the judge is like, you know, bullshit. Yeah. So they fought back and forth with the prosecutor would get up there, even IRS agents got up there, and prior to my plea agreement, there was nothing written in there as restitution. And the government came in the day of my sentencing and said, well, we believe he should pay back $5,400,000, and so they wanted to tack on, you know, 12,000 pounds, and they wanted to add in 5.4 million in restitution. They wanted to make me the leader. They wanted to add a gun, and then they wanted to add money laundering. And this is all like, this is how shady the government is, dude. When I did a plea agreement, it was all there, bro. I made sure it was in writing. And you and I, when you think close a deal or you do a business, it's in writing. You're good to go, dude. The government just backdoored that whole agreement. And at sentencing, they're like, oh yeah, there's more dope. He had a gun. He's a leader. And none of that was in. It's like they found this stuff out while they were waiting to sentence me. And they're like, oh yeah, 1,800 pounds. Like, no way. Like, it's way more than that now. You know what I mean? And so,
did the judge bite into this shit?
The judge was like, so here's where he stood with it. He said, I'm not going to give him the 4 points on the gun because my lawyer argued, I didn't even know where that house was. I'd never even been there. Granted, the dude stashed my weed there, but I don't know where, I've never even been there. Like, how could I be responsible for if this dude has a gun or he doesn't have a gun? And then the prosecutor's like, well, he knows with stash houses comes, you know, reinforcement and guns. And even my lawyer tried to say, well, you know, he doesn't carry himself with guns. He's never been a gun person. He has no violence, so the judge said, I'm not going to give him the gun. And then when it came to the money laundering, he was like, I'm not going to give him the money laundering because it's right here in the plea agreement that says -2. So he's like, I'm not giving him that. So I'm like feeling a little bit of relief. There's 6 points that my 32 was all of a sudden was like all the way at one point in the pre-sentencing report was number 40. And a number 40 is like fucking borderline like life in prison. If I would have been sentenced at number 40, without a doubt, especially if I went to trial, it would be like a 30, 40-year sentence. So then the judge said, as far as the leadership,